Hey guys, Phaze here. In today's video, we're going to cover the tactics needed to defeat all 7 of the Uber bosses. We'll take a close look at exactly how to handle the most dangerous and problematic mechanics of these Uber bosses. Let's jump right in. First up, the Shaper, one of the most iconic bosses in Path of Exile. Let's take a close look at his abilities. Occasionally, a vortex ball spawns that slowly chases you. When it touches you, it creates a permanent vortex puddle on the ground, dealing cold damage over time. Kite these until a few are stacked, and there's a good opportunity to drop them in a safe spot near the arena edge. Try to overlap future balls on top of existing puddles. Handle balls poorly and the floor of the arena can rapidly spiral out of control. Balls can be completely removed if detonated within one of the side coves, as seen here. Shaper's beam is telegraphed by yellow pulsing energy at Shaper's feet. This does large damage over time, but isn't hard to dodge. Shaper fires 3 projectiles that do massive cold damage. These penetrate 40% of cold resistance. Balls move slowly initially, then accelerate. Continuously circle Shaper to minimize the risk of getting hit by these. Shaper will often create 2 clones of himself. Visually, these have a transparent, ghost-like appearance. Clones mostly just spam projectiles and beams. These aren't particularly dangerous with circular movement, but it's important to be aware of their location and minimize backtracking. For bullet hell, Shaper goes invulnerable, then rapid fire releases a nova of projectiles from many different spots in the arena. Hug the bottom right corner of the arena, sidestepping as balls come near. These hit quite hard. Life Flask spam, Sapphire Flask, and Molten Shell come in handy here. Shaper's slam tends to be his deadliest ability by far. Shaper first animates into the void and then appears directly above you. Once you see Shaper above you, quickly use movement skills to get out of the way. This will one-shot most characters. Focus on 2 things, managing ball placement and closely watching Shaper for the slam animation. Always be mentally prepared to dodge a slam on short notice. For movement, slowly circle around Shaper and minimize backtracking. Be aware of clone locations, but don't make them your primary focus. Despite Shaper being one of the easier Ubers, his slam is still incredibly deadly and shouldn't be taken lightly. Next up, Uber Elder. This is a dual boss fight that contains both the Shaper and the Elder. Many of Shaper's abilities are still present here, particularly Shaper's beam, projectiles, vortex balls, and slam. Madness propagators, or squids, will occasionally spawn throughout the fight. If not killed within 10 seconds, they drop a dangerous puddle on the floor that deals massive physical damage over time. These are always priority number 1. Killing them as quickly as possible is the key to keeping the arena clean and giving you space to comfortably dodge abilities. However, in the final phase of the fight, squids should be completely ignored. Vortex balls are unchanged in this fight. Keep moving, don't let them touch you, and drop them in a safe spot when the opportunity arises. Balls can be removed by dropping them out of the bounds of the arena on the left and right terrain outcrops. Rarely, Elder will rapidly spawn tentacles underneath you that slam the ground. Stay mobile during this to avoid tanking every hit. Elder's slam is telegraphed by him flying into the air and rapidly spinning, firing projectiles in all directions. The safe zone for projectiles is directly underneath him, or very far away. Next, Elder will dive into a portal on the ground and come down on you from the top of the screen for a slam. Quickly use movement skills to avoid getting hit. Occasionally, an expanding nova will occur. 3 rings expand from a safe zone, and once they reach maximum distance, they start exploding. If you aren't in the safe zone when these explosions occur, you take large physical damage. Kite the balls along the outside edge of the safe zone, and keep dodging Shaper's projectiles and beams until the novas end. This is very similar to Shaper's bullet hell, though not quite as dangerous. As usual, hug the bottom right corner and sidestep balls. Occasionally, Elder will emerge underneath you and deal damage over time in a cone. Get out of this quickly. This applies a 60% action speed slow lasting 7 seconds. While slowed, only focus on dodging abilities and staying alive. Don't worry about damage. The final phase is often the hardest part of the fight, especially if damage is low or the arena has many puddles. The goal is to blitz down Shaper, as the fight is trivialized once he's dead. Ignore all propagators for the rest of the fight. They're no longer worth killing. Keep Shaper on screen to watch for the slam animation. Slowly circle Shaper so his projectiles and beams are mostly ignorable. Elder's damage is usually insignificant if defenses are sound. Keep the arena clean, don't take your eyes off Shaper, and Uber Elder will fall in no time. Next up, the Maven. Maven can be incredibly difficult for those unfamiliar with the fight. However, with practice, everything can be outplayed with minimal risk. Getting hit by any of the laser beam abilities in this fight applies Maven's punishment. This turns off all forms of life and energy shield recovery for 10 seconds, and lowers max elemental resistances by 10. Avoid this at all costs. When Maven says, listen to her, it's good advice. Stop moving completely. After 1 second, laser beams will spawn above your character and sweep towards you. Just flame dash out of the way. 4. She'll fire 5 waves of 3 projectiles in your direction. These hit quite hard. To avoid them, go far away from Maven, then sidestep each of the middle projectiles. 4. She'll charge, then release a line of fireballs in your direction. Quickly run far away from her to bait fireballs. Then run around the outside edge of the fireballs after the release. Fireballs are incredibly deadly. They can also explode on minions or totems and clip you in the process. 4. She does a circular slam directly in front of her, just hop out of the way. When you hear, the outer brain will charge up a large ion cannon. Get out of this as it's very deadly. There's one sound effect that is pivotal to success when fighting Maven. Let's call it the sound for simplicity. This is what it sounds like. This sound means that 3 orbs are accelerating to chase you. Similar to previous fights, touching these leaves a permanent gravity well on the floor. Try to stack every puddle in one spot. If ranged, place them in the center. Melee can place them on the outside edge of the arena. Failing to stack these degen zones will make the rest of the fight significantly harder. When Maven's health drops to 0, the brain will move to the center of the arena and do a fatal platform-wide explosion. Quickly get onto one of the outer platforms to avoid this. Afterwards, the brain becomes damageable and multiple map bosses are summoned to fight you. Avoid laser beams, dodge map bosses, and focus most of your damage on the brain itself in the center to quickly end the phase. The memory game is just that, a game of memory. Maven spawns multiple map bosses at the beginning of this phase. Killing them quickly makes the next part much easier. The arena is separated into 3 sections. To begin, Maven will flash a sequence on the arena floor that needs to be remembered. Afterwards, you'll have to emulate the same sequence by walking into those sections in the exact same order. If correct, the section flashes green. If incorrect, the section flashes red, causing the center degen to rapidly expand. If the degen reaches the edge of the arena before you finish the sequence, it's fatal. There's a trick that makes this a bit easier. Stand in the first section and position yourself next to the second section. Doing this means you don't have to remember the first 2 sections, which makes things much more manageable. Many players use some sort of naming convention for the sections to improve memorization. Some use left up right, others use 1 2 3, use whatever works for you. Surprisingly, the final phase is much easier than the rest of the fight. Lasers do have to be navigated during the memory game, but adds will not spawn. Bring Maven's health to 0 and the fight is over. Avoiding lasers, keeping the arena clean, and memory game consistency are the keys to defeating the Maven. Next up, Cortex. This is a multi-boss fight. Venarius floats above and summons 2 bosses at a time in 4 phases. Each Cortex map has 3 to 5 randomized mods, which are amplified. This can sometimes lead to an absurdly difficult boss, or a trivial one. Here are some of the more dangerous mods. Always check map mods after zoning in. This fight has many different abilities, but these are some of the more dangerous ones. Ground Puddles deal massive physical damage over time and slow your action speed. These reset each time you kill a pair of bosses. There are quite a few other abilities with visual ground effects that indicate danger. As a general rule, if there's some sort of visual effect on the ground or orb, steer clear. The Fire Synthete does a spinning jump in the air, then lands with a fire explosion. Just step away. The Fire Blast at the end of this combo is one of the deadliest abilities in the fight. Initially, the Fire Synthete puts both hands in the air, forming an X with orange lasers, then slams the ground with a frontal fire wave. Afterwards, he'll immediately start tracking you and charging up a devastating fire blast in your direction. Dodge at the last second to avoid this, or move rapidly around him. This also applies an insanely strong ignite, if not immune. For unstable energy, the Titan will begin drawing in orbs. The more orbs he collects, the larger his follow-up burst will be. Orbs can be intercepted by running into them to prevent them from reaching the Titan. When Venarius says, the burst comes shortly after. Outranging this is recommended. For Laser Storm, the Synthete will fly into the air and initiate spinning lasers. Immediately get underneath him, wait a few seconds, and then flame dash over lasers to safety. A massive slam underneath him will soon follow, so stay far away until it happens. The Wormhole Slam is another one of the very dangerous abilities in this fight. It's signaled by the phrase, "Feel the pull of the void." The Synthete in the center of the arena will begin charging up a frontal cone slam. Pay very close attention to the direction he's facing, as that's where he'll slam. Look at his electrified fist in the air. The slam happens on the opposite side of the fist. Next, multiple black orbs will chase you down. Stop moving when they're about to reach you. After a brief delay, you'll get teleported directly in front of the slam. Once teleported, instantly flame dash out of the way. In this example, green is safe, but don't flame dash into the red. Avoid all ground effects. If it looks bad, it probably is. For general movement, slowly circle the outer edge of the arena to avoid getting hit by random abilities. Randomized mods can make Cortex very scary. Abandoning the map is always an option. While Cortex is one of the easier bosses, don't underestimate the Wormhole Slam and the Fire Synthete's Fire Blast. Next up, the Eater of Worlds. Eater is a dangerous lightning-based boss, and many of his abilities always shock, so shock immunity is required. Eater is the only Uber in the game where evasion and block are huge benefits. They mitigate a couple dangerous multi-hit attacks, including his auto attack. Eater's auto attack is a bit unusual. Tentacles come out of the ground and attack your current position. Dodging these is very important. Watch his animations closely and sidestep accordingly. If you stand completely still for these attacks, it's very deadly. Drowning orbs float around the arena and must be avoided throughout the fight. If an orb is at your back, it slowly moves towards you. If an orb is in front of you, it gets pushed away. Upon touching an orb, a couple things happen. First, you get a massive action speed slow, which can lock you in place for a long time if you cast something. Second, you start drowning. This means black will begin to seep in from the edges of your screen. If the entire screen becomes black, it's instant death. Get out of it quickly or log out before it happens. When he says, a tentacle slam is coming. Tentacles emerge from pulsing electric circles on the ground. Don't stand on top of these when they emerge. They'll then slam the ground, doing massive damage in a large area. There are 3 slam variations: 2 separate tentacles that slam towards each other, a straight line of 2 tentacles, and a straight line of 4 tentacles. Just move far away from them if you're unsure of where the slam is targeting. For hunger, Eater dashes towards you, then does a delayed massive slam centered on himself. Just run as far away as possible. Bait the position of the second hunger to make dodging it easier. If you hear or, Eater will fire a dangerous multi-hit beam after a short delay. It can usually be dodged by flame dashing out of the way or directly behind Eater right before it happens. The timing can take some practice, and the timing changes if the boss is chilled. The phrase signals that the hectic intermission phase is beginning. 3 things happen during this phase. A doom laser with a steadily growing AoE will chase you. The laser applies a stacking more damage taken debuff with a 2-second duration. Occasionally drop this debuff where possible. Multiple tentacles will slam from the outer edge of the arena towards the center, dealing massive damage. This makes the center of the arena incredibly dangerous during this phase. Be aware that tentacles also rapidly deal attack damage while retracting, which can be mitigated by evasion or block. Purple spheres spawn throughout the arena. To end this phase, all of these spheres must be energized. Briefly stand in each circle to energize a sphere. When the phase begins, energize spheres in the middle of the arena first, before tentacle slams begin. Then work around the outside edge of the arena, energizing any others. Be hyper aware of every tentacle slam, as these tend to be extremely deadly. If you take more than around 20 seconds to energize spheres, a one-shot instant kill occurs. After the phase ends, stay away from the center of the arena for an extra 5 or 10 seconds, as tentacles will often slam the center even after the phase is over. Sidestep when Eater auto attacks, pay close attention to tentacle slams during the intermission, and dodge all lightning beam bursts. Focus on those 3 mechanics and the Eater of Worlds will go down before you know it. Next up, the Searing Exarch. Exarch is one of the most challenging Uber bosses, with arguably the highest skill cap in the game. He'll track you with a channeled blazing salvo barrage lasting roughly 3 seconds. To minimize damage intake, spam movement skills and don't backtrack. Annihilation is usually deadly if you stand still. The word Incineration telegraphs a massive delayed explosion centered on Exarch. Just stand outside of the circle until it explodes. This is not tankable. The phrases Disintegration and Cleansing is a 2-part ability. Disintegration lays down a long flame wall in front of Exarch. Stand a decent distance away from him and stop moving. Once the flame wall is placed, flame dash over it. The second part of the combo, Cleansing, causes the flame wall to slowly be pushed away from Exarch. Throughout the fight, lines of searing runes will snake through the arena. This fills up more of the floor as the fight progresses. If stepped on, the 10-second debuff lowers your max fire resist and increases the cooldown of movement skills, which comes into play later. The Molten Minotaur is a tanky ad that enrages if you move too far away from him. Once enraged, the Minotaur gains a 3-hit combo. with the third hit being a devastating ground slam. There's a windup so it's easy to dodge, but it's sometimes hard to track while dodging other mechanics. One Minotaur spawns at the beginning of the ball phase. Searing Exarch's ball phase is one of the most iconic boss phases in Path of Exile. It's also one of the most difficult. Lines of fireballs spawn from all four edges of the arena, then sweep across the platform. Maven from above will continuously zap balls at random, destroying them and opening walkways. Always prioritize running through open holes first. Try to save Flame Dash as a last resort, or to Flame Dash 2 waves diagonally. If you step on a rune during this, limit Flame Dash usage and pay close attention to your Flame Dash charges. While dodging balls, be careful not to walk into the Minotaur windup slam. If able, damage the Minotaur during this phase, otherwise kill it afterwards. Getting good at the ball phase requires a lot of practice and repetition. For those that want to improve at it, buy a few invitations, keep Exarch at low health, and repeatedly do ball phases over and over until you get the hang of it. Master the ball phase, keep Minotaurs under control, and before you know it you'll be farming Uber Searing Exarch. Last but not least, Sirus, Awakener of Worlds. Sirus is an incredibly challenging boss. There's also a lot of boxes to check for this fight. Immunity to Corrupted Blood, Shock, Freeze, Ignite removal, and some Chaos resistance. Upon entering the arena, be careful not to run into storms, as they deal immense damage. Sirus floats around the arena, and can be brought down to the ground by getting directly underneath him. The fight begins with 3 repeated phases inside of a circular ring. Stay inside of the ring or Sirus will reset back into the air. In the first 3 phases, a storm always spawns in the center of the ring. The storm slowly but aggressively chases you. However, the storm is unable to pass through Sirus, so put Sirus between yourself and the storm to maximize damage. A group of meteors will occasionally rain from the sky, creating ground puddles that deal damage over time. They're telegraphed by glowing beams on the ground. Avoid these. During Corridor Blast, Sirus lays down walls around you and launches orbs down the lane, alternating sides. There's a few ways to deal with this. Immediately exit the corridor behind Sirus, ending the phase. Another is tanking the orbs, or dodging the orbs by sidestepping. When Sirus says, "Die," rapid fire beams of energy are coming your way after a short delay. Most of the damage can be avoided by flame dashing to the side. This beam hits quite hard. Occasionally, Sirus will teleport you to the middle of a circular meteor maze. Take too long to escape the maze and Sirus will drop a deadly meteor on you. For longer mazes, quickly map out your escape route before you start moving. A Quicksilver Flask with increased effect is often used to ensure a speedy exit. After bringing his health down, Sirus retreats into the air and spawns another storm. Hang out at the chill spot in the bottom left to wait for storm movement. He'll sometimes cast spells at you while waiting, just dodge them. Once the ground under Sirus is clear, quickly get underneath him to bring him back down. The 4th time you bring Sirus down, the final and hardest phase of the fight begins. Meteors will occasionally strike the ground, leaving permanent puddles on the floor that deal massive damage over time. These puddles act as a softened rage. If your damage is too low, then the floor eventually becomes a nightmare to deal with since there's nowhere to stand. Thus, the goal is to kill Sirus as fast as possible, before the floor overwhelms you. The final phase also comes with some new, dangerous abilities. For Sirus and 5 clones start charging spinning beams. The real Sirus has a visible health bar and is damageable. After a couple seconds, the beams expand and begin rotating. Touching a beam applies a stacking debuff, making you take more damage and move slower. Getting more than 2 or 3 stacks can start to be very dangerous. If you get too many stacks, or need to regain flask charges, it's possible to run far away for a breather. The multi-clone die beam is incredibly dangerous. Sirus splits into 12 clones. The goal is to figure out which of these clones is the real Sirus, to dodge his devastating die beam. There are a couple ways to do this. If you see the initial formation of clones, the first one to appear is always the real Sirus. This is kind of hard to catch though, and sometimes happens off screen. Interestingly, with headphones, you can use the direction of his voice to track his position. Listen to this and try to figure out which Sirus is real.
Feel the thrill of the voice.
Did you get it right? Once his location is known, quickly start planning your flame dash. In this example, these might be decent spots to go. There are 3 phrases that tell you exactly when to dodge. Here they are.
Meaning is feel the thrill of the voice. You will long for non-existence.
The beam always fires at the same point in each phrase. These are worth remembering. In the final phase, with proper defenses, spinning beams and puddles are more of a threat than Sirus himself. Minimize unnecessary movement. The more you move, the more likely you are to walk into hazards. This is another one of those fights that requires a bit of practice to master. However, once everything clicks, Sirus is an incredibly satisfying boss to conquer. Here's a cheat sheet that shows some important things to know before walking into these fights. For overall difficulty, Searing Exarch and Sirus are by far the most challenging, followed closely by Maven, Uber Elder, and Eater of Worlds. Shaper is generally considered the easiest, and is often the first Uber kill for many people. Cortex difficulty is highly variable due to the nature of randomized mods. Feel free to pause here for reference in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Which Uber boss is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below.